So last week, or 2 weeks ago, we gathered here, and as facilitated by my good friend Tessa Dooms, we had Ubut Ayabonga, who gave us a socio-economic and policy-based outlook on the consumption of alcohol in our communities and what that meant. And essentially, I think to recap those who weren't here, there were a couple of things that were spoken about. We concluded after that session that there is a concerted effort in society by capitalist forces to regulate black life in a way that makes them dependent on liquor. This doesn't occur just by the social integration of alcohol through forms of one-upmanship and cultural practices. It's also an intentional economic effort through various conglomerations that actively ingrain alcohol into our communities. I think something that was said is that second to the SASSA grant, alcohol is the easiest, most available thing in our communities. This week we take a different look, a bit more socially facing one, and we have Veli Mbele, who I'm going to ask to come up shortly. Veli is an essayist and focuses in his work primarily on identifying contemporary issues in black life and tying them into historical context. So today, we're going to have a further look at consumption in our communities, and I hope you enjoy. So how our flight is going to go, after this introduction, Veli is going to make his opening remarks, and then I'm going to ask him a few awkward questions, and thereafter we move on to the aspect of collective wisdom. So I hope you guys have aspects, questions, contributions as well. If you want me to, note you put up your hand. I'm also checking on Twitter. It's hashtag Amanzi Sessions, capital A, capital M, I think. Let's enjoy, let's engage in a robust way. I view this interesting gathering as the same way our parents used to, organizing our bodies in a different way after work on a Monday in the name of sobriety. The same way our parents used to go to meetings on Kaledo or community forums or something like that. It's an interesting way for us to orchestrate our lives for the better. So I hope you enjoy. And I'd like to call up Veli. Can call him
Lesedi. Mina ngingusompisi owaphemba ngamakhanda amadoda abanye bephemba ngomlilo. Izimzimba elihle ezinye umahlatshe kuhle njengethole. Ilanga eliphuma endlebeni yendlovu layophuma endlebeni yengwenya ithinde sayibamba ishisa esandlwane. I call those people because without them we don't exist, right? I know there are people who think ancestry is a belief. They think it is a belief, and this is how deceptive thinking is. Ancestry is not a belief. We are ancestry. And with us, without us, there's no ancestry. So it's not a matter of whether you believe in who you are, because ancestry is who you are. So those who think you have to believe, we still have a lot of work to do. It's not a matter of belief, it's who you are. So you say we have 5 minutes, right, to do high level. So my input is structured I have 3 things I want to speak on, right? And we will see how we structure that over the conversation. But I must also confess, my spirit is heavy, right? Extraordinarily heavy. As black people, our spirits are generally heavy, right? So extraordinarily heavy because I can speak from the perspective of, text and pedagogy or episteme about the subject, and be like you, practice law somewhere along the road, I can speak on the subject like that, but also speak from simply lived reality, which everybody can connect with, which is lived reality. Your mother, your father, your uncle, your own relationship with the bottle, you know. And this is why my spirit is heavy, because when I got the invite, I counted the number of people that I lost because of their relationship or enslavement of alcohol, you know. And not just lost in the physical sense, but also losing people in the sense that in the physical form they are here, mentally, spiritually, they are absent. And for me, that is the biggest difficulty with our condition, that many of us that move around in the physical form are non-existent. You know, and that is for me the deeper crisis. It's not just about what we consume, it's about the fact that our existence is non-existence. Our existence is non-existence. And we have normalized our existence, which is non-existence, and we refer to it as existence. And that's one of the things that the substance we refer to as alcohol has been able to do, and how it has been weaponized for us to weaponize, rather to normalize our non-existence, which actually we regard as existence, but it's actually absence. And even not just absence from space, but absence from the very self. Absence from the very self. So that is really by way of high level in terms of my introductory remarks. And I will speak to three things later. The month of May, and it's important to the work that you are doing as iPhupho, L'ka Biko. We use the calendar of our colonizers, of course, right? Which means even our concept of time is colonized. Which means our very existence is a falsity. Because the manner in which we measure space, time, anniversaries, progress, victories, all of those are false discourses. Even things like success in the current system, right? What you regard as progress and success is a false discourse because it's based on a false understanding of space and time, which does not come from our cultural DNA. Then I will also speak later about my interpretation of what is erroneously referred to as a band or a jazz group, iPhupho, L'ka Biko. I think it is not a band or a jazz group. I don't even think they are musicians. Even if they refer to themselves as such, I respectfully don't agree, and I can explain why. And then later we will talk about the black world and alcohol. Not so much the black person, but the black world and alcohol.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for those opening remarks. So I think there is one aspect I will ask you to take a bit further before you enter the aspect of the month of May. I think you interestingly raise that alcohol has a cadence in our society. It's used as a measure of time, and it's used to tell the social mood, right? So we mark our days with alcohol, we mark our nights with alcohol, we mark our seasons with alcohol. Differently put, the amount of alcohol that's being consumed is directly proportional to the amount of social order that's required, even through the sober person, right? We know that the world of work puts different demands of people, and so when that world is not as abject, then people tend to drink more. In one line, I say, you know, it's easier for you to, or differently put, you know, we're able to tell the time based on how jovial a society is. So my question is then, how do you begin to interject on that kind of rhythm and time telling, right? The idea that somebody is more likely to be intoxicated in December, on the weekend, and at night, and it fundamentally marks our everyday. where do we start interjecting and how do we start interjecting on that particular inclusion of alcohol in the very core of our social fabric?
Yeah, so, and allow me to be difficult in a nice way. Right? So, when we deal with ourselves, yabo, njengabantu, rena batho, when we deal with ourselves, like one of your themes is healing. So when we deal with ourselves, especially when we use Indugu Zondlebe Ziyakhanya, which is their language, right? We must also be careful how we use their language in order to understand ourselves, because we must always be mindful that we are using their language, right? That they have crafted, they have invented. We don't know. They didn't consult us when they crafted it and what was their agenda. So my point is, even this, the phraseology or the framing that, alcohol being in our social fabric, right? Who says it's our social fabric? Who says it is our social fabric as Black people? Because what social fabric do we have when, to start with, we are a conquered, dominated, landless, native people? So if we are landless as a basis, what other things can we claim? Social systems, social fabrics, because what social fabric do we control when we don't control the basis for existence? So all I'm saying is, while it is important to understand social fabric, but we must understand that social fabric itself comes and goes out of existence based on whether people possess the material means with which to create life. Because that's how you change or impact a social fabric. If you control the material means with which to create life, to give life, right? And I'm with my brother here, Ushweme, the co-founder of our movement. So there's also this concept of Black life, and we have started to interrogate that. Is Black existence really something that qualifies as life? To start with, does it qualify as life? Because, Black lives matter, but does Black existence really constitute life? Because when you look at the nature of our existence from generation to generation, it is not life-giving. Our relationship, our existence is not life-giving, And so the same goes with fabrics and how alcohol enters. It is always important to define what is the basis of life for us as Black people, before we maybe go into things like, do we want to change the fabric of their society? Because it's definitely not our society to start with. We are visitors in our own land, in the land of our own ancestors, in the manner that we exist. So a number of things that we intuitively or subconsciously refer to our own are actually not our own. Because we are not able to direct them and use them in the manner that we want to use them.
So we are technically unwilling participants and unable to make of ourselves a different kind of person because the parameters of our society are very clearly drawn in a way that's pointed away from us. And I think alcohol is often used as a tool to numb this. There's an interesting discussion around sobriety where someone says, what can't we stand about our society that forces us to constantly be drinking or sedated in one way or the other? So I think that's an interesting segue, because there is a practical engagement then you're going to have around our capturing of time, right? And I'll give a bit of space for you now to engage us on the idea of the month of May in general and then further expand on that. That would be an incredibly useful next step on our discussion. Okay, sure.
So you said in your very generous intro that one of the things that I do as part of my daily existence is to, as an essayist, also to locate Black existence through my writing in historical context. And I come from the school of thought that says the most fundamental lesson that all Black people, regardless of their geographic location, must learn is Black history. That Black history is the basis of all disciplines, given where we are and given our condition, and is to qualify it authentic Black history, right? And which is why every time we have a conversation, it's always important to locate ourselves, given our dislocation. So the month of May has got a number of important anniversaries for us to remember, which will speak even to some of the points you've made. Yesterday, the 5th of May, marked the 118th anniversary of the Bambata Kamancinda Zondi guerrilla warfare. Why is that important? The creation of the criminal colony referred to as South Africa in 1910, right? One of the wars that Bambata Kamancinda Zondi was fighting was to prevent exactly the creation that was inaugurated in 1910, to affirm our dignity and our agency. And Bambata Kamancinda Zondi, is important that we shouldn't forget him. More closer to iPhupho L'ka Biko, on the 10th of May this year, we mark the 13th anniversary of the passing of Ubai Ukeche Umsut, Ubabu Zimasile Ngawan, one of our greats. It's important that we remember him and recall him. On the 11th, we recall the anniversary of the passing of the late great Robert Nesta Marley, right? Another important influence. On the 12th of this month, the 189th anniversary of somebody very important, Inkosi Uyintsha Khawuta, whose head, some of us believe, is still with the British. Right, and there's even one of our artists, KwaXhosa, who has got a song who's asking Iphi inhloko kayintsha. You can Google that. The 19th of May marks the 99th anniversary of the birth of one of the greatest Black men to ever walk the earth, Ubabu Omuwale, Malcolm X. He's just a year younger than Uba-Uhlati, Mangaliso Sobukwe. Uba-Uhlati is 1924, he was born 1925. And then the 19th as well marks the 94th anniversary of the birth of Umamu Lorraine Hansberry. You know, I pause a bit when I get to her. I've got a book here, To Be Young, Gifted and Black, which contains her work. She is important because we would not have had the words To Be Young, Gifted and Black had it not been for her, by the way. Remember, they were made popular by Umamu Nina Simone, but Umamu Nina Simone actually got them from her. She was in hospital and was invited to go and deliver a speech for young Black kids in the US who were at a literary concert. And at the speech, at the event rather, she said to them, I checked myself out of hospital to come and tell you, you are young, gifted, and Black. And in remembrance of her, Umamu Nina Simone then recorded the song. She gave us those words, but she was more than that. Then something that you raised. So the 25th of May marks the 61st anniversary of African Liberation Day, not Africa Day. African Liberation Day. Why is this important? Because you also now hear people saying Happy Africa Day, right? Because it's as if it's a pagan holiday. It's not a pagan holiday. In 1958 in Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah called a meeting of African leaders And they designated the 6th of April as African Freedom Day, 1958, at the All African People's Conference. And then when they went to Ethiopia to then form what we today know as the Organization of African Unity, they then changed African Freedom Day to African Liberation Day as a day for Africans to pause to assess the extent to which Africa has extricated itself from colonial invasion or foreign invasion. So it can't be a pagan holiday, Happy Africa Day or Happy Africa Month, right? It can't be. The other thing that's important is that at this meeting, this was the first time that Frantz Fanon and Patrice Lumumba met at this meeting. And what is significant about the two of them, if I digress, is that Frantz Fanon and Patrice Lumumba were born in the same year. They died the same year. You know, and in one of his work, Fanon speaks about the assassination or the killing of Lumumba. But it is through Kwame Nkrumah that both of them had a very beautiful relationship. And then the last one I want to speak about is the 98th anniversary of the birth of the band leader, composer, who's regarded as the most influential jazz artist of the last 100 years, Ubaba Miles Davis. Also the month of May. Sorry? Okay, I thought somebody was saying something. I was going to say they must speak up. They shouldn't be afraid, you know. So the point that one was making with all of this is to also show that our being here at this very moment is not a coincidence, because there are ancestors that I've mentioned who came before us, right? And intuitively, our gathering in this assembly is also dedicated to them. Let me leave it at that.